All right, it looks like everything is coming through nice and clearly. Good morning, or as other famous streamers would say, hey there. Oh no. Oh, how does Dave say it? Doesn't matter. In this video, I am going to be demoing the Arbortech Power Chisel. I have used it all of about 2 minutes on a scrap of wood to make sure that it actually works. Haven't actually used it in any serious capacity. So this is the packaging it comes in. This is the newer model, the PCH 600. Yep. They have had at least 2 other models. The 350, I want to say, which was based on the old grinder body. It didn't come with chisels. Well, it came with 2 chisels, not 7. And the very early edition, which came as just the attachment for an angle grinder. So I'll get the box out of the way. So let's have a look at what is included. You get the grinder and chisel attachment, I suppose, included. This is a variable speed grinder. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So this grinder, variable speed at the back. I'm not entirely certain of the validity of having that, given previous models haven't had that, but we'll see. It could be a great feature for some finer details. You also get a range of chisels and kind of a nice fabric chisel holder. So there are 7 chisels. As far as I know, this is all that Arbortech have in their range. And that could be, I guess one of the downsides of this system is that when you look at traditional carving gouges, things like that, there are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of combinations, and we're left with 7. Now, some of that maybe is a bit overkill. Maybe this is something that you can supplement traditional hand carving with. Again, something we'll see in this video, hopefully. So this tool comes in at $2.99 Australian dollarydoos, which seems kind of expensive and kind of is expensive, but contextually perhaps isn't that expensive after all. The chisels, as I said, there's 7 that come with it, and the tool. Chisels in Australia for carving gouges range between about $45 and $65 each when they're new. So these 7 are going to cost about the same as 7 starting gouges. Now, are these the right ones to start with? That's a different matter. Are they good steel? Well, they are meant to be high-speed steel because of how they're used, so they should be fairly durable. So in terms of cost, basically you buy the chisels and then you get the grinder for free. So that's how I justified it anyway. Whether or not that's a good way to justify it is yet to be seen. So we'll have a look at the chisels. Let's see, we'll get the V gouge out. Let's go back to our close-up. So they come pre-sharpened out of the box. They just had some plastic sleeving on them. I don't know if I can get good focus. Let's see. The particular camera I'm using does not have amazing autofocus, so I have to turn that on and off. So they are sharp out of the box, which is nice. What I am noticing is the grind isn't amazing, so I probably aren't going to be able to see that, unfortunately. The 2 wings aren't even. Now this is something you'd kind of want to slipstone with, or actually learn to sharpen it freehand, I suppose. So that's a little bit annoying, but from my early test, they do actually cut straight out of the box. So yeah, it's interesting. You'd want nice and sharp for carving, but you know, if it works, that's not too bad. If we look at some of the others, like the flat, I guess it's called, this is also not the greatest grind on it. Do I have any more zoom? I do. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see that, but that's not a straight cut all the way across. If I was using that to pair something, that'd be a little bit annoying. But we're not talking about joinery here, so maybe it's not the end of the world, but That's something you do need to take into consideration. I really should have bought a slipstone with it. I just forgot to order one. There's a tiny bit of a burr on the back, so you could strop that off. Yeah, that's pretty much gone. Yeah, so look, the chisel seem in good condition, brand new out of the box. We'll give him a shot. So yep, cool. Installation of the chisels is super easy. You just basically insert it into the nose and there's a little detent to eject. Clicks nicely, pulls right out once you press the button. Right, so how does this tool work? This is basically a very hyperactive mallet, is probably the best way to describe it. The cam converts the rotary motion of the angle grinder into a linear back and forth, a little bit like an impact driver, which has both rotary motion and impacts the back of the bit. So that means that this is only moving a tiny, tiny amount. I think it's like a 1 mm travel or something like that. It does not say on the back of the box, but let's say it's a millimeter travel. But it does it 11,000 times a second per minute, not a second, which is quite a lot more than what you can tippy tap a chisel with. So it goes through some pretty hard wood pretty well. The downside of that is you do need to keep the cam lubricated. So they do include some lubricating oil. You're meant to put 1 drop of this in the back here. There's a little spot every 15 minutes or so. So not really a big deal, but I guess it is consumable to think about. Though I would hazard a guess at 1 drop, this bottle's probably going to last me quite a few years. Before I do a demo, why go for the power chisel rather than either traditional carving gouges or other power carving tools? Over the traditional gouges, I want to add some embellishments to my work, but not necessarily become a carver. So for me, going down the hand tool route is not a bad thing, but comes down to cost. I'd need quite a few gouges just to do the basic work. And this was here for about what I'd be spending anyway, so I thought I want to give this a shot. And why not other power carving tools like the turbo plane? The turbo plane and other power carving tools are all pretty much round or some variation of round, so you can't get crisp corners. The other major downside is the size of them. This one's quite large, but you can get the rotary burrs for like a Fordham or a Dremel. Where was I going with that? They also kick up a lot of dust. So because this is carving, creates chips, not dust. So there's some advantages, some disadvantages. This is going to be slower for bulk removal. This is going to be faster, but then I don't have to clean the workshop for 4 hours. So we'll see. I don't think I'll try and mortise on this, David, but David suggested I should do a mortise with a straight chisel. Maybe not this time, but I'll see if I can put something up later. I might try and pine first. I don't want to break my chisel before I've had a chance to properly use it. And no, I'm not going to be decorating the Easter. Thank you, BK. All right, so my first carving that I'm going to be trying out is on some jarrah. And if you're not from Australia, you may not know what jarrah is. It's about the similar sort of density to purple heart. So it's not the hardest wood in the world, but it is a little bit on the hard side. You're not going to normally carve something like this. And I guess this is an advantage to the power chisel as well. Something this hard would be maybe not impossible, but it would be infeasible to carve as your first project because it's hard. And this is a dwarven font from Lord of the Rings. that says we don't play Monopoly here. It'll be adorning my gaming dining table, so it's sort of appropriate. All right, so I do have noise isolation stuff for my microphone, so you may not actually be able to hear the chisel, and that is a good thing. So this is not the quietest tool. It's not the loudest, but it's not the quietest. It is a power tool after all. So sliding switch, oh, we're out of frame. Sliding switch makes it go. But until the tip is actually engaged in the wood properly, it doesn't do any cutting. So where are we? There, cool. All right, so that's cutting well. My spray adhesive skills are not very good, but well, that template is definitely a bust. Let's see, pencil. Right, so I've turned this up to 5, sorry, I'll turn it up to 6. It does get a fair bit louder and a lot of air is coming out the sides. It's venting, it's an angle grinder after all. Let's see, can I get any closer up? No, that's about the limits of that lens. Yeah, so what you can see from this very quickly is that it just goes right through the jar. There is no issue there. I've got some chips around, but I don't have dust everywhere. And there's absolutely no pressure being applied from me. When I'm holding the chisel, I'm basically just guiding it through the wood. And the really nice thing is that the cutting edge is the only part that's actually sharp, and because it's not spinning or anything like that, it's just vibrating back and forth, I can guide it with my finger. So I will say that this grinder body is a little bit heavier and maybe a little bit wider than I had expected. This, as I said, I think it's their second or third iteration. Being a variable speed model, it is a little bit bulkier, I guess, for extra electronics. And that is a bit of a downside, and that's why I'm working on my carving bench rather than my workbench, my regular workbench, because this is up just a little bit higher. And this is not the most comfortable pose, but just dropping it down that little bit, it's actually pretty good. Being able to guide it by the chisel itself is much more similar to regular carving rather than power carving. As it is a regular angle grinder, it does have the threading for the handles. So look, I can grab a handle and show you how ridiculous that looks. That just threads into either side, and look, you could use it, but this is like somehow even more awkward because you don't need to apply any real pressure, so you don't need to really brace it up against your body like perhaps you would carve and gouge if you're going through Jarrah normally. So yeah, like I can understand that. There's a little bit annoying that it is that little bit larger than their previous models. It's not the end of the world, and for some people, they'll be able to grip it better. A little bit smaller, a little bit lighter would be nicer, but it goes through Jarrah like this, so compromises have to be made for the power, I suppose. The difference between the speeds, there is something in the manual, which I think the manual has gone into the bin. Oh no, here we go. The manual has 1 to 4 light chiseling of wood-like materials, 4 to 5 medium chisel of wood-like materials for unique applications, and 5 to 6 general chiseling of wood. I think for the noise perspective, I'd probably run it on 3 or 4 because it doesn't kick up as much air, so it's a little bit easier. I had something on the bench when I was testing it out. The first time it flew right off when I sped it up. So look, it works in Jarrah, so that's pretty cool. I could keep demoing that, but I do have perhaps another better application to demonstrate, which would be spoon carving. I've got some fiddleback or curly red gum, which was a fence post, believe it or not. This is gorgeous looking stuff. Don't know if it's going to quite capture the chatoyance on camera. Gorgeous looking stuff, but even harder than Jarrah. And that gives me an opportunity to try out, well, these are actually quite sharp, the gouge. Now, this is the limitation of Arbortech's system, is that we don't have a whole range of gouges available. So you can carve with it, but you can't do everything carving could do. If there was an adapter, maybe that'd be cool. Maybe they'll introduce some more in the future, who knows? Probably not at this stage, they've had them for quite a few years. That would be nice if there were a few extra tools, but I think if you were going to use it for carving spoons and things like that, you might want to look into sort of a hybrid approach where you do the majority of the work with the power chisel, the bulk stock removal, particularly on the bowl of the spoon, and then switch to hand tools to finish off the bowl. All right, so I'll give the spoon carving a bit of a shot. And again, this is in harder than Jarrah material. So look, I don't know whether this is forest or river red gum. The difference being one's hard, one's very hard. I think forest is the harder, and that is about ebony levels of hardness. So look, if you can carve through that in no time at all, that could be worth it for a lot of people. And I guess with the this thing, that'd be really good for people who want to do signs, because that powers through it, really powers through it, and that's hardwood. And if you want to make a sign, this is a lot cheaper than a CNC, and in a lot of ways a lot quicker too, because you just draw it on and you cut it. You don't have to go through the whole G-code process, swapping bits in and out, blah blah blah. And the results are like a lot smoother too than a router bit typically is. All right, so I'll get a close-up of changing chisels. So we've got this button ejector on the bottom, chisel pops out, that's it. The flatter of the two gouges. Easy peasy. We need to go down just a tad. There we go. So one thing to keep in mind is that this is not defying physics. So we still need to pay attention to the wood grain and how wood actually works. If you want to defy the laws of how wood works, you really need to use one of the rotary tools to abrade away the material rather than cutting it away. All right, let's go. All right, from that, what you can see is, well, hopefully what you can see is that's actually leaving behind a burnished surface. And again, this is straight out of the packet. I think these still need some stropping, some finer edge treatment, but they are pretty amazing straight out of the box. Playing with the different speed settings as I was going, I noticed that on really 5 and 6, it is getting a little bit loud and uncomfortable for me. But as many of you will know, I am a big sook when it comes to noise because chronic migraines. So, you know, I could just work a little bit slower, still working a lot faster than if I was using hand tools to carve red gum. So I've switched to the larger gouge. We'll see how we go with that. Again, I'm not a carver. I haven't made a spoon before, so I'm guessing on the ergonomics of it, but it's going through that with little effort. I'm having to hold the tool up and that's it. Like, I'm not exerting anything physical at all. Now, to my eye, it's like I'm scooping ice cream out. This is coming out in these fantastic chips. They're quite large, actually. And the only time I've got any sort of chip out or anything like that is when I've ignored the grain direction. So as I said, this isn't a magic tool that stops you from paying attention to grain direction. So it could be a really good learning tool as well if you are interested in getting into hand carving. If like a makerspace or something like that had one of these, you could learn the art of sharpening and stropping, but you don't have to do it too often because these are high speed steel. They last quite some time. You could learn how to read the grain direction for best results and then eventually get into hand tools if that's what you wanted. I was going to prepare like a finer detailed carving, but I just didn't get around to it last night. So let's see if I can write some stuff freehand on some relatively soft Vic Ash. Let's see if I can find a better demo piece. Yeah, so I'll go through some of the other chisels it comes with. It's got the flat, as I said, a larger V, a U, and a smaller scoop. So probably the small V is going to be best for just carving a name in something. Again, this is the real downside of the system is that there's just not a huge variety. So you're never going to get away from having some hand carving tools, I think. Yeah, as I said, you don't have to worry about holding the chisel. So I've got no tingling or anything like that in my hand that's been guiding the chisel, which is nice. One of the downsides of angle grinder power carving is often you'll need to wear gloves just so that you don't get the vibration through your fingers. So it can be fatiguing. So let's see how fine controlled we can go. I guess the other downside to this system is it's going to be very difficult to sit down and carve. Let's see if we can do it. And I'll get to comments and stuff once I've given this a shot. Does sitting work? Well, the answer is it technically does. It's very uncomfortable because you ideally want to get a 25-degree angle. So that's not too hard to achieve, but the outlet for the air is coming straight in my face doing that. So it's not the best. Wouldn't recommend it. But this is Big Ash I'm working on at the moment, and it's a lot softer. So I've got to really hold back because you can see how much tear out I'm getting because I'm going across the grain. So it's quite interesting. This is almost too soft to carve, despite being hardwood using this tool. All right, I'm just going to see how much I can hold out with this small gouge, just for funsies. What's really cool is the chips that it's carving out. This come out in one big spaghetti piece. Sorry, that did come in two pieces, but that's a fairly large chunk. So I guess if you are doing chopping boards, there you go. You've got your juice groove in one tool. No need to worry about a router. May not be the straightest, so I guess you could jig something up using the threaded inserts here. Keep it power chisel on a track. That's what you really need. Okay, so yes, a metal carving vise would work well. This is the vise is a cheap one, and this bench lives outside. So this is chops. The carver's horizontal optimized planing surface. So this is the one that can tilt up. And this is actually where I think the power chisel could be quite good, because you can get more traditional carving stance. Well, this is tricky to do on camera. So yeah, a more traditional vise for carving might work, but for large pieces, I can have it on this angle and attack it this way, which I think is pretty cool. But a little bit outside the scope of this video. Yes, I can see my wife is helping out by slightly being evil. Yes, MDF is a wood-like material that Percy does approve of. And yeah, David, you're right. It is basically a power engraver for wood. I don't know what other materials you'd use it on other than wood. I guess you could use it on foam pretty well for sculpting out stuff, adding some fine details. I don't think there's anything else other than foam that I'd be game to try it on. And yeah, I think bigger carvings are probably where it's most suited. It is surprisingly good at nice, crisp, small carving. So that letter I carved, the dwarven letter is, let's see, it's a whopping 30 millimeters tall, and the narrowest sections are about 2 millimeters wide. If I had a smaller V, maybe something a little bit more limited, that could be really good for getting finer details deliberately. But again, even if I'm just roughing stuff out and then have to come back with hand tools, I think this is quite promising for me. It's obviously not going to be for everybody. I don't have acrylic. I do have Delrin's. Oh no, it's HDPE. If you bear with me one moment, I will go find some. And I guess there's plywood as well that could be interesting. Let me grab something from the scrap bin. Oh, that's an interesting idea. How about some form ply? That could be interesting, because you've got your instantly black finish. Grab the Delrin as well. This is going to go terribly. HDP. I don't know why I keep saying Delrin. All right, so if I lower my bench back down, I've got a 12 by 12 inch, 300 mil. 300 mil by 19 millimeter lump of HDPE. Not sure why you would carve it, but why not is a good enough answer. There are so many cables and cameras, well, two cameras, but so many cables, and try not to trip over everything. So I look a little bit sillier than usual, which is somewhat impressive. All right, we'll start with the form ply. I want to see how that looks. Know you're Australian when you don't even bother taking away the spiders on the workbench. Where are we? Here. Well, that looks fancy. I really like that. Huh. Hadn't thought of that. That's so the results on that are super crisp. I'll post a photo on, I don't know, Instagram or something later. There's a tiny bit of chipping on one section, but I am pushing through, just really rushing it. So, huh. I have no idea of the application of this, but it's just such a stark contrast that like you can see it on a tiny little preview window here. And yeah, that shows up super well. So I don't know, drawer fronts maybe where you just engrave into form ply for what's in the drawer. That'd be cool. Huh. All right. HDPE is a funny material, as is Delrin. They're a little bit squishy, so they can be at times difficult to fixture up. You need something highly accurate because they can deform at certain sizes. At least that's my understanding. So I'm not sure if that will affect anything. Oh, this is, yeah, okay. This is just the easiest way for me to clamp it down is with clamps rather than the vise, because I think I'll replace it with like a quick release vise. All right, what haven't I tried yet? Haven't tried the little scoopy one. You guys really want to see a mortise? Okay, I'm going to try pine. I'll do it. I'll line that up next. And believe it or not, I do have pine in my workshop. It surprises me too. All right, hearing protection. Think we might need a little bit more bright. There we go. I don't know, if you could get like a continuous curl and then glue it up, you could make some HDPE rings. There we go. Not sure of the application for jewellery, but it works, I guess. So like with any plastic milling, it has that sort of weird white colouring to it because it's been hit, 11,000 times a minute. So it's not abrading it away. I don't know if I can get in any closer. You can actually just make out the series of lines. So while it is kind of burnished, at the same time it's plastic. So I don't know what you'd really expect there. Does the tool heat up? The plastic doesn't. The tool is a little warm on the housing here. Nothing else is even vaguely warm. Where I've been holding it, slightly room temperature, but here is just where it's warm, which I don't think that's an issue. I think if I didn't put the oil in, it could be an issue after a while, but given it's pretty easy to oil, I don't think that's going to necessarily prevent anything. All right, mortise time. So this is where we need to petition Arbortech to create a range of straight chisels so that we can do anything less than a 19mm mortise. I guess if you're framing a house, you could just use this instead. Be a very good look up a ladder, having all your contractors with a power chisel. Well, I'm not willing to sacrifice anything other than pine for this. I think we're out of focus again, so let's find the button. Canon's older cameras don't do a clean video out. Oh no, I pressed a button. Oh no. I don't do clean HDMI output and autofocus at the same time. So that's why autofocus isn't working until that little square appears. Alright, we'll try mortise. That'll do for the mark out. Alright, so vertical cuts are going to be the hardest thing on this tool compared to hand tools, because ideally the tool does want you to go in at a certain angle. But look, we'll see. I can maybe scoop something out and see how we go. So the tool really wants me to come in at that sort of angle rather than straight up and down. Turn this down to 1 for the most control that I can muster. I guess if you needed to hide a screw or something, that's a good way to peel it up and then glue on the covering again. Might get out an actual chisel and establish some lines. Ah, that's way overexposed. I am very sorry. It's very difficult to do this without being able to see what I'm doing. There we go. So can you cut a mortise with the power chisel? The answer is maybe, but you should not. Look, it's no worse than those drill press mortise attachments. Those are utterly garbage. So it's about as fast as that. But the nature of this tool, the flat chisel, is not long enough to get you a substantial enough mortise. Maybe if they came out with like a cranked chisel version, yeah, that'd be great. A narrow and cranked you could use to replace a router plane. Maybe not, but that's a fun idea to entertain anyway. Yes, a pigtail dovetail, yeah, a dovetailing power chisel would be great too. Really, really annoy all the traditionalists. All right, so if there's any other questions, I'll take those now. Otherwise, I think it's a good spot to leave this. The power chisel works much better than I thought it would. I also have the Fordham reciprocating chisel, which is the same thing, but for a flex shaft tool. And it is, to be blunt, hot garbage. You really need to apply a lot of force for it to start biting into the wood. And then when it does, it's much, much louder than this. So this is a really pleasant surprise at just how intuitive and easy it is to get the wood actually cutting compared to that tool. The Fordham one gets a little bit better once you do really hone those chisels, but they're itty bitty ones. They're good for maybe replacing chip carving, but only as maybe the finishing passes. So perhaps one day I'll set up a comparison between the two. This one works, the other one I wouldn't waste my money on. Unfortunately, I did waste my money on it. Yeah, so this does what it says. It would be great if there was more chisels in the range. Works on hardwoods and apparently even softwoods and plastics. I really like the idea of using form ply for carving. I need to think about that. So as I said, $2.99 Australian, which is like $3 American, I guess. Yeah. Paring end grain. Okay, I'll try paring end grain. What do we got? We've got that red gum. Choosing the red gum because it's nice and hard, and I can actually get it exposed correctly because it's not bright white. I'm not expecting great results. This isn't a paring chisel. Maybe I need to run it upside down. Oh yeah, we'll give that a shot. All right, to be fair, that's sort of what I expected. Yeah, a honing strop would help, but for whatever reason, I just forgot to get a slipstone. You could definitely put some sandpaper around a dowel for the insides of stuff, for the rounder ones. So some high grit, maybe start at 400, go to about 1200. Otherwise, I've got a piece of plywood with some crubber on it. So for the flat chisel in particular, you could get that strop. But do remember this is high-speed steel rather than regular tool steel. So it is going to be a little bit more tiresome to polish up. But ultimately this particular one is not square enough that you're going to get necessarily a great result. It's actually pretty wavy, so I might look into some sort of sharpening jig for the grinder to improve these bevels. The gouges aren't too bad. There's a couple of nicks in them, again, from the factory. But it might be just work it on a slipstone back and forth and a waterstone and see how we go. But overall, I'm really quite happy with this tool for my purposes. So, I don't have them in here. Let's see. 1 second. So what came to mind for me was first the dwarven carving, and then also these drawer pulls I've been working on for the cabinets set of drawers. This texture I did with the ball gouge. It's fairly easy, a little bit messy, a lot messy, and because of the diameter of the ball gouge and that you can't really change the attack angle, like you're left with the same size circle, more or less. So using a variety of gouges, in this case it's really only the, there's 3, but I can also go deeper. I can come at it from different angles so I can get that texture more easily. So for me, it's going to hit those 2 projects really well in a lot of my furniture, which is nice. Should I learn to hand carve? Yeah, probably. I'm not going to, not in a hurry. So this gets me out of that bind without having to CNC something or make a jig or whatever. I can use it for that. Will it replace traditional carving? No, absolutely not. Will it supplement it? Maybe. There is no vibration whatsoever from my hands or arms. The grinder body is pretty good, but you're also not like getting it into a death grip. You're sort of just holding it. So that's fine. You could definitely have one of these gloves with like the anti-vibration gel pads. But on the chisel side, like fingers are fine. It's really surprising and very counterintuitive holding the vibrating part of a power tool and going, yeah, no, this is fine. This is how you guide it. So compared to other power carving, particularly other angle grinder stuff, it's amazing. Fordham, the rotary tools, you do get a little bit more vibration than with this, but they're pretty close too. All right, I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all for tuning in. I don't know if TWK Live will become a thing. I had the equipment. I had to buy a $20 live streaming HDMI to USB adapter and a HDMI cable, a long one. So it wasn't really a lot. I had all the other equipment, so I thought this was a good test. I don't think I'll do it like a regular weekly show or anything like that because I don't have that much to say, to be perfectly honest. But if I come up with some ideas, I'll share and ask for opinions. Thanks, everybody.